we've talked to authors who've hired their own photographers and or designers, but we haven't really gotten into the weeds of how it all works. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. It's Andrea and Wynn. I'm here today with Molly Stevens. Hey, Molly.
Hi, Andrea.
Do you remember long ago, Bon Appetit, there was an article by chef and cookbook author Brooks Headley of Superiority Burger, and his article was called How Not to Write a Cookbook.
Yeah, he got into the financial aspect of you get your advance, and what if you want to hire your own photographer, your own design team, and what that leaves you with.
Yeah, and it was just like nothing.
Yeah.
Brooks, he's a good writer, but he was just like, it's ridiculous. It's crappy.
Yeah.
You know, to take matters into your own hands. But some people do.
Right. And as a creative, if you are an author with a huge visual sense, a style, your own brand, your own platform, I could understand the impulse to say, I want to take the whole project. I want to deliver an entire, designed, photographed, laid out, but I've certainly would never take it on.
Yeah, it's like you're self-packaging. I noticed that with Alison Roman's work that, she's done that 2 books in a row.
Yeah. If you read the acknowledgments, she has her own designer. She hires the photographer. She runs the photo shoot.
We've never had Alison on, so, I'm just so happy to be chatting with Alison today, but not just with Alison, because we've got also her designer, Britt Cobb, with us. So let's bring them on and let's start talking about designing and making incredible cookbooks. Welcome, Alison and Britt, to Everything Cookbooks.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
We're very excited because this is a wonderful new project that you have put together. Alison, you've done so much in the food space, and I was thinking about your journey and trajectory, and I was thinking about how you were a student at UC Santa Cruz for a short while, and our paths may have crossed because that's where I live. Up the way from Santa Cruz is a patch of surf called Mavericks, which, around the late fall, there's like these gigantic waves and, they're like titans of Mavericks and they go for the surf contest. I think of you as a Maverick in this space.
That's so nice. That is so, so kind. Thank you.
Because you've done things just like the way you want to do it. And it's just been so creative. Tell our listeners a little bit about the seeds of that so that we understand, your brain a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Britt could tell you about my brain, perhaps more than me, but I think a lot of it comes from having exposure to other people's brains and having exposure to a lot of other experiences and styles, both cooking and food and taste and preferences visually, design-wise, and business-wise and everything. I think the more you know, the more you're able to sort of determine what is best for you because you've seen all the options. You've experienced them. You've sat with them. You've been a part of them. And then you can kind of make a really great informed decision of like, okay, well, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to leave that. This I feel like could be done differently. And I think a question that I always ask myself when doing any sort of creative project is what has not been done? And I feel like the easiest way to get me to do something else is telling me what has been done. If people are like, oh, well, this works and this person's done this and you could do that. I want to do the opposite. I think carving one's own path is just something that I really admire in others when I've seen it in any sort of medium, that I feel like that is something that I've aspired to.
Yeah, because like a lot of people we know who are in like the food media space, they've gone in cooking school or they've cooked at restaurants or they may have had a parent in publishing or something like that. You just like went right into it.
Yeah, sort of blindly, actually. And when I think about I feel like we're all in a similar boat because of when we all started our respective careers. None of us started by being like, I'm going to be famous on Instagram, or I'm going to have this many followers, because that concept didn't exist at the time. It was sort of for the love of the game. And the love of creating something and making things in the world, which motivated us, and sharing knowledge and teaching people and getting people excited. I feel like having that as the benchmark of remembering why I started doing what I do, carrying that over now is sort of a good North Star, I guess.
We're here to talk about your new book, Something from Nothing. But more importantly, we're talking about your collaboration with Britt and the design team and how this book is a part of a larger brand, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, if I stack your 4 books, this being your 4th cookbook, they're trim size, they line up, it's a beautiful chunk of bookshelf seeing those 4 lined up together. We're very curious to hear about the trajectory of these books as well, how they've evolved and we want to get into your life has changed. You've been very transparent about that, and how these books are both very much you and recognizable as Alison Roman books, but yet this one is somehow different. That's a lot to put together.
Yeah, it really is. And so of the 4 that I've made, 2 of them Britt and I made together. So I had the first 2, Dining In and Nothing Fancy, which were sold as a set. They were like a 2-book deal. I made them in pretty quick succession. When I was working on my first book, Dining In, I had kind of already imagined what my second book would be. I always envisioned them sitting on a shelf together. And at that point, I thought I'd be lucky if I wrote 2 books. I wasn't sort of thinking about the grand, what are 8 books going to look like on a shelf? I was like, well, I know I have 2 books, and what are they going to look like on a shelf? And within that design decision, I did want them to sit perfectly together on the shelf. In my own collection, I love the variety. I love the trim size variety and the chunky ones and the thin ones and the tall ones and the colorful ones and the black and white ones. But I thought that for me to have 2 side by side, I wanted them to fit together so people could identify them. So the font is actually the same, except Dining In is uppercase and Nothing Fancy is lowercase, but it's the same font. So same, but different. So when I sold another 2 books, and I knew that they weren't going to be sort of like the third in the trilogy. In my brain, we had a pandemic between them. It felt like a different time. I was going to make a dessert book. 4th book, we didn't know yet. So I felt like there was an opportunity for there to be like a bit of a different design play. So when I started working with Britt, I thought, okay, well, this dessert book now to me feels like the bookend of this trilogy. It's a sweet book, so it's decidedly different than the first 2. For anyone who doesn't like sweets or bakes or desserts, they're not going to buy it. But for people that, are like, oh, I like what you do and I'm going to fill my collection or I'm interested in desserts, of course. So I thought, okay, this book could sit alone on the shelf, but it also should sort of fit with the others. So I showed Britt the past designs, and that's how we came up with sort of the spine and font treatment, the black and white for Sweet Enough. Right, Britt?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He could get into the nitty gritty on like the actual font and why we selected it. But, I will say people were really up in arms that the type size and the alignment did not match the other 2. That wasn't an accident. We did examine that. We did look at them with the other 2. And I thought, I think it's kind of nice if this one stands out. Because of the 3 of them, it does stand out. It's a dessert book. It's a totally different vibe. It had a different aesthetic. It had a different design on the interior. It was a completely different subject matter. But to me, it sort of fit within the era of the other 2. Now with Something from Nothing, the 4th book, that felt like a complete departure in pretty much every way because it had been 8 years since I had written Dining In, my first book. And there was, I think, quite a personal and creative evolution from then to then. And I didn't and don't see myself as a brand, capital B, where like everything I do fits within a box. I'm a person. I'm a human being with, evolving tastes and preferences and ideas. And so I feel like to have this accurately reflected in the book from design perspective felt really, really important to me. That said, I do think that trim size, physically, it's the perfect shape for a book and the perfect size for a book. And I did explore thinking, are there other books that I really love holding and think sit well open on the counter and this, that, and the other? Like, how does it feel in your hand? Is it too big? Is it too small? And ultimately, I'm like, I think this is the right size.
You and Britt had worked on 2 books together. At what point, Alison, did you decide that you wanted to bring in your own designer? How did you and Britt come together?
Yeah, I had brought in my own designer from Dining In. So I worked with Elizabeth Spiridakis who was the art director at Bon Appetit when I worked there many, many years ago. When I sold my first books, I knew I wanted to work with her because I felt like I needed somebody who knew me and obviously who was extremely talented, but was familiar with the kind of style that I wanted to bring and also who I liked talking with. Because to me, the design was such a huge part of the process. And really the biggest, to me, other than editing, the most collaborative part of the whole process. Because my recipe development and ideation is pretty solitary. I do it pretty much myself. There's not a ton of back and forth with anyone. And I think of that as my lane and something I'm really good at. Design, not so much. You know, I have opinions and thoughts, but I really, to me, part of the joy of working in books like this is that you get to collaborate with people that are really great at what they do. And if I thought I could design my own book, I think they would all look a lot different and probably not as good. So it's exciting for me to work with people that I'm like, ooh, this is a dream. Like I get to pair my food with this person's design sensibilities to make what I think is the best book possible.
It's so interesting hearing you say that. And I think as a cookbook author, we talk to a lot of cookbook authors on the show, and you have different involvement with design, but to show up with your first book and know you want to have your own designer.
That's ballsy.
Yeah, it wasn't something that they did at the time.
Yeah. So where'd that come from? And how'd you sell that idea?
My agent and my editor were on my side, I think, for that, and they trusted me.
What does it take to get the book you want?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think with each request that I made as an author, especially first-time author, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that that was so ballsy. I didn't know that other people didn't do that. I didn't know what was normal. I just knew what I wanted, and I would try to get it. And, you know, some of the things I asked for I didn't get, and some of the things I asked for I did get. And that is sort of the relationship between author and publisher, I suppose.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, Britt, you design a lot of different things.
Yeah. Not just books. I design all sorts of things. I'm a graphic designer, and everyone has their own definition of what that is. And I choose to not be too specific as to the type of medium that I work on. But yeah, I'm a graphic designer.
And so you work in digital as well as in print and...
Don't talk to digital designers about it because they say I don't do what they do exactly. But yeah, I design things like websites in my own special way. I design a lot of brand identities, logos for businesses and people and things like that. That's sort of the baseline. But when I was in school, I was sort of trained as a print designer. So I have that background, and I might be one of the last living... There are other graphic designers who design books, but there aren't many of us who do this kind of thing and do it often and love it. They are a labor of love. And actually, all design is a labor of love. But yeah, I particularly like designing for print. The level of detail, the fine-grained details you're working through is a good way to start, you know, where you're really noticing the small bits. Getting lost in hours of work of setting type, I actually find kind of therapeutic. Then how do you take that kind of background and apply it to designing, you know, some graphics that go on a big wall? You know, you're used to working under a microscope, and suddenly you're designing with 10-foot-high ceilings. So, yeah, so I do print, physical, environmental graphic design, do a little bit of digital website design too, but it all kind of has a branding quality to it.
So did you find Alison, or did Alison find you? And how did you agree to work together?
Well, I'd like to think she was following me for years and was just waiting for the moment to call me. It didn't happen that way. We have a mutual friend who put us in touch, and he knew that she was working on her third book, and he and I were always texting about things like typefaces and graphic design things, and put us in touch, and just had one conversation, and I kind of think we were on the same wavelength. And I really admire Alison for what she does, because her work is so personal and is an extension of who she is. And often my job is the opposite of that. I'm the neutral party. I'm meant to go in as the investigator, figure out what it is my client wants to express, and then do that in their style, not my style. So, you know, in initial conversations with her, it's less about like, hey, I'm a designer that does it this way. Stand back, follow my lead. I'll get us to the end zone. It'll be great at the end, I promise. Now, I'm actually kind of can't imagine designing with that big a blank slate. I need something, some fodder to work with. And anyone that has a strong opinion about something or a preference or something, I love that. If there's a history to pull from, I prefer that. So yeah, in initial chats with Alison, she always had a point of view, or kind of, even if the point of view was sort of, like, I think I kind of want it to be this way, it would be enough to prompt me to go work in a certain way and show her things and come back and say, here's what I came up with. Let's look at it. What's appropriate? What's right? What's wrong? Always kept an open mind as to where the work can go and being influenced by the people I'm working with.
There was always a thread to pull on, even if it was a short thread,
Yeah.
Yeah. So for our listeners who are thinking, like, I want to find my own designer, what should they have in mind? And then Britt, what do you want to hear?
Obviously, like with a lot of careers and sort of professions, social media, the internet is a great place to find people. Oftentimes, it's easy to look at work that you do like and think, okay, what do these all have in common? Oftentimes, there are designers that are really great at one thing or 50 things or a style or an era or print, digital, etc. And so I think it's about honing in on what you want and then finding out who does that well. Originally, what drew me to Britt for Sweet Enough was that I wanted it to have this sort of 70s era, very bold typography, almost having the type and the font in the book be as memorable and impactful as the photographs, which were very high contrast, sort of bright sunshine, poppy, very cheerful and vibrant. I wanted everything in terms of the font to contribute to that without distracting from it because it was so strong. And I felt like he did that really well. That was sort of the vibe that he presents in his work. If I can speak for you, Britt, I feel like the work that you put forward that you're most proud of and what you're sort of known for, and that attention to detail on how the tail of the A hugs the top of the T, and you're like, oh my God, I've never thought about this much. But I wanted that. I wanted someone who cares as much about font and typography and color as I do about photography and food and recipes and style. And it was such a great fit. And honestly, not perhaps the likeliest candidate for the style of Something from Nothing, but I liked working with him so much. It was so easy and effortless and such a pleasurable experience that I wanted to work with him again.
It's something you said earlier, Alison, about people being up in arms because of the font change. It just speaks to how personal your work is and how personally involved, I don't know, what do you call it, your audience?
Yeah. The green. Wow. Really, when I was on book tour, I do an audience Q&A at the end, and every city I visited, it was like, why green? Where's the black and white? And I'm like, we all change, we all evolve. And it's so funny to think, if you're an artist that makes music and you have 4 albums, nobody expects the albums to all be the same. You sort of anticipate them all having a different energy, feel, vibe. But for some reason, for cookbooks, it's sort of to me, staying the same is about the worst thing I could do for myself because it's just not where my heart is. It's not the creative path that I enjoy going down. I'd like to think if I just continued to put out the same book 4 times in a row, there would be a small percentage of people that would really love that. But I think most other people would be like, what else you got? Why are you doing the same thing over and over again? And I wanted the outside to accurately reflect the inside. And it's such a different book than Dining In and Nothing Fancy and Sweet Enough that, of course, it was going to be different. That means green, I guess.
and so I guess that sort of leads me to 2 questions. Is one, Britt, how you take this evolution of Alison's. I mean, you say right in the beginning about this book, Alison, I feel both proud and nervous to admit that this book could potentially be described as adult. And so as a designer, you're trying to convey, this transition, this change, but yet it's still an Alison Roman book. What are the elements you think of to do that? And then also, I think we want to talk a little bit about the content too and how you did that through voice as well, Alison.
Alison said it earlier. The outcome of this book, I'm so proud of it. And it's exactly as it should be. But if you were to ask me, just to do things that feel natural and use your favorite typeface, Britt, use your favorite color palettes, I can't say that I would have defaulted to browns and greens and reds and earthy colors, right? If you look around my house, it's just filled with black and white elements, like artwork and furniture, right? And so I appreciate that Alison knew I could go there, and I had confidence in myself that she has a particular vision for what it can be. And I have to be kind of neutral in the relationship and just kind of see how I can usher it to where she's trying to get. And I will say, Alison always, at the 2 books we've worked on together, has always provided a very short and simple mood board. And by that, I mean, she goes on Pinterest, she creates a board for me and pins a couple dozen images. It is incredible how she's probably just, I don't know, Alison, if you're up all night thinking about what should be on that board, or if you're just in an afternoon on a subway ride or something, like tap, 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 pin, pin, pin.
All of the above.
But
I'll Pinterest anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know how polished this selection is she gives to me, but I can notice the threads that she's trying for me to catch on to. For both of the books, I could catch on. The first one was about being a bit more expressive and confident with type, taking phrases and kind of treating them as pull quotes. Like, that's sort of the thing she's going for. There's a modernism, like she said, 60s, 70s era type was sort of the vibe she was going for. With Something from Nothing, much more ivory colored paper, hand-drawn elements that could have been a stamp at some point.
Right.
That's kind of the vibe that she was giving me in the Pinterest board. And so that to me is sort of the DNA. Like, that's what she's going for. Now, Britt, buckle up. Let's see if we can do that. And then the way our process goes is Alison sends me the mood board. She sends me a folder filled with great photography taken by Chris Bernabeu, who also shot for Sweet Enough, and a manuscript of some few recipes. And I go back on my side and I create what's known as sample spreads, right? And it could be this way, it could be that way. This is the idea I've got. And, it's about 100 pages long. I'm just like this, like that. You like this red? You like this brown? How about this? At the end of it, I hope there's something in there. Even if she said, this one page is the only one I like, like, that's useful. Or if she said, none of these pages are right, that's useful. Well, okay, well, what about them isn't right? But in both books, I don't know if I was able to interpret what she was putting out in those mood boards, but I got it kind of close each time. And Alison, I don't know, maybe you're just a easy customer. It never goes that
I'm not.
that easy.
I think we all know I'm not.
I was going to say, I don't know you well, but
We click. I don't know. Are we kind of on the same wavelength?
I am with you. You're just that good.
Thank you.
At what point is the publisher, your editor, seeing any of this?
I don't like to show them anything until I'm 100%.
Yeah.
Because if you look at a spread of stuff and you're like, oh, I love this, except, what if it was green instead of burgundy? And like this font was like a little smaller, and we'll just show the publisher and tell them that. No, because they're going to look at it and be like, I wish it was a different color. And we'll be like, well, no, we're going to change it. It's like, no, just show them exactly what you want. Believe in it 100%. Be open to feedback, but go in with conviction. And until it is exactly where we think mutually it is its strongest, I don't like showing it to anyone because, same thing with covers. It's like, you only present what you're excited about and what you would be happy with them picking. Because if you give them 5 and you only like 3, they're going to pick one of the 2 you don't like every time.
That's true.
Exactly.
So having your ducks in a row and being like extremely confident with all the options and making sure there are options. Sure, you don't want to say, here's our one and only. But, we can get to the cover a bit later, but that's always, with every book I've ever done, is always an issue. But I think that's probably 85 to 100% of authors feel that way or have had that experience. But yeah, I'm very fortunate that this was, my 4th book. And by and large, the team at Clarkson Potter has been very open. And I don't want to say deferential because they have opinions, of course, and thoughts and suggestions, but they're very trusting. And they're very like, this is what you guys want to do. People like it. It does well. I think we've sort of earned this trust. It was not that easy, with the first book, of course, but it was easy-ish in that there's so much back and forth that goes on before they see it. And same thing with my text. I do the same thing where like I make sure the text is exactly what I want and how I want and edited to my standards, et cetera, and before showing it to anyone. Because if you give somebody an unfinished or a half-baked something, you immediately sort of lose control over what makes it yours. I think you're very vulnerable and susceptible to other people making decisions for you.
Do you hire someone to help you edit the book before you send it in, or it's just you?
I did this time because I was very, very pregnant, and I then was very, very postpartum. And I knew when I was pregnant, which I didn't expect to get pregnant during this process, but I did. And it became very clear about 5 months into my pregnancy, looking at my deadlines and the timeline. And I was like, I'm going to need help. And thank God I did, because I had my baby a month early. I was supposed to submit the manuscript before he came. That didn't happen. I ended up doing a lot of work almost immediately postpartum. And that would have been a really tough thing to do alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I sort of cleared it with my editor, Frances Lamb, pre-baby being born, and was just like, the deadline's a little tight and very close to when I'm supposed to have a baby. I would love to bring in some reinforcements just to help me make sure that everything is tight, instead of like leaving him with this pile of, a nightmare manuscript to kind of sort through.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in a way, you're almost your own book packager.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it'd be interesting going forward, and you may not know the answer to this question, but if you were to do another book, if this hiring your own editor as well is something you found gives you more control, as you say, over the process.
Yeah, I think it's also attention. And I'm a very high touch person. I like to work very closely with people. And to me, you get that more when you are working directly with somebody and you're their only client.
Right.
Not every author feels that way. Not every author wants a high touch situation. Not every author needs that much attention. I think that bookmaking to me is such a special thing that we get to do. And in the light of the internet being sort of everyone's primary source of a lot of things, they even become more special, because you put something on the internet, it's a newsletter, it's a YouTube video, it's a tweet, it's an Instagram post. People can forget about it in 5 seconds. But books are with you for a very long time, hopefully. Hopefully they are on your shelf, they decorate your home, they get pulled down time and time again. They're things that you can reference and read and hold. To me, that requires such a high level of care and attention, making sure you get it right. And making sure that it is, that doesn't mean that all of my books don't have typos. Trust me, they do. Although this one may have the lowest and fewest amount of typos, which I'm very proud of.
That is something to be proud of.
Yeah,
Yes.
but they all happen, and we've all gotten issued a correction, and someone's like, well, seems like you should have not had any errors or typos. It's like, seems like it, doesn't it? Well, these are forever, and you can't just like pop in and edit something. But you guys know, it's so much back and forth with the edits and the copies and the versions and the drafts and the spreads and that it's amazing that they come out as well as they do.
Yeah.
They're nail biters, man.
Oh, and every time. It's like
Every time.
you give yourself months and it's like you still only have minutes somehow.
Yeah, it's frightening.
But what a thrill.
Yes. Let's talk about that typeface, because it's an unusual typeface to see in cookbooks in 2026. That serif. I actually was reading an article about serif trends last year. Something from nothing was in the article. The article was in the Wall Street Journal.
I love that.
The lean serif. They were like talking about how serif has like this modern, but at the same time kind of retro quality, but also a powerful quality, echoing like the Apple ad Think Different, going way back, and how it's coming forth. And then they said, well, look at Alison Roman's new book. They used a serif. And so,
can you believe it? Wow.
Yeah. So tell us about like your choice of the serif.
I would love to tell you about that. But I know exactly what article you're talking about. Rarely do I find myself in press about typography, but in this case, I kind of sort of showed up. But actually, it just shows you how attentive people are and how they're paying attention to things that you thought, wow, it feels like my job is so niche, and yet people pay attention to what typeface you're using. Specifically, if I may nerd out for a moment, the typeface you're talking about is different than the typeface that's used within our book. It's the condensed typeface, and you all might know this from the David protein bar, really condensed version. Alison was doing promotion for her book tour, and another designer was working with her at the time who used a similar typeface.
I think the book tour poster was the David font, because they flagged it for me. Like, does this bother you that it's the David bar? And it did. It did bother me. I was like, I do hate that. It did bother me because I didn't want to be like the protein bar.
Protein bar.
You know, but it was a good fun and it worked on the thing and it was more ephemeral than the book. So it was fine.
Yeah. Oh, and Alison, I am such a consistency nut. Like, why isn't it the same typeface everywhere? And I always kind of like when something she'll put after the fact, after we've designed something together, there'll be some piece of merch or some sort of promotion of something that she's doing. It shows up a little bit different and there's a different spin on it. There's an extra element on it. Like, go, Alison. I'm such a rule follower. If you tell me I should dress a certain way, I'll dress a certain way. If I should talk a certain way, I'm going to talk a certain way. And I always kind of like when it kind of evolves and changes just a bit.
The article talked about a lean serif, but yours isn't lean.
Mine isn't lean, but like serif typefaces, without even thinking about it, we're reading articles and books every day, reading serif, even on our screens too. You read serif typefaces every day without even really thinking about it. It was a conscious decision we made with this book, and that the previous three were very sans serif heavy. And by default, serif typefaces are much more natural seeming. The way that they're drawn are actually based on handwriting and carving into stone. So whereas sans serif can feel very mechanical and geometric, and machined serif typography is much more kind of easier to read and just felt appropriate with the world that Alison, the vibe she was creating with the book.
And I just want to chime in on the choice for that as well, just because I also think that serif fonts can read very serious and very sort of bookish or uptight. And so coupling that with the illustrations from Rosie McGinnis, I felt like this can work if there's also a very human sort of hand-drawn element coupled with the photos, which a lot of them are taken on film. So there's a graininess to them. They're very natural looking. There's natural light. They're plated just sort of casually. Like, I think in juxtaposition with a more uptight, sort of serious seeming font, the rest of those elements make sure that it all works together. Because I think if it had been like a very rigid design structure, very clean, specific, precise photos and food presentation, I think the whole book may have felt a little stuffy. But I think with everything working together and the color of the cover and the illustration and the end pages, I really think it works. And perhaps if the font had been a sans serif, it would have felt maybe too modern or too new or too young, maybe. I don't know. I think that considering all the elements working together is what I think makes it cohesive.
I love where this is all going. It just how deep into it you get. And at one point when we were preparing to talk to you, Alison and Britt, we were sort of talking about cookbooks as, vibes versus source material versus home decor and where they fit in and everything. And you're answering a lot of that, and your intense attention to detail and to feeling of, how something feels. And I'm so glad you talked about the illustration and the photography and want to get into that, but it's all in keeping with your sort of high-low
very much
taste that you present us with over and over again in this book. And there's so many things, like normally we spend a lot of time talking on the recipes and everything but because we have Britt here and want to talk more design, but like your choice not to tell us what kind of olive oil to use and not to tell us, specific brands and not to get too specialized about things like that. And sort of this, I don't know where this is going question wise, but maybe we'll take it to the photography and how it all works together. But I think for listeners who are kind of trying to understand the Alison Roman universe, this is a real insight into that attention to detail. All these little things add up.
Yeah. It's hard because it's, I'm not hyper calculating, but I am precise, I guess, if that makes sense. Like there's no like master plan necessarily, but I know what I like and I know what I don't like and I know what I want and what I don't want. And somebody might read the book and be like, she doesn't even tell us what olive oil to use. But that's not an accident. It's not an oversight. I don't, because it's not important to me in the success of this book. And I think if you're a cook and you like cooking enough to spend $38.99 on a book, you probably have opinions about olive oil, or you're going to research it and figure it out. But I also want somebody who doesn't care to pick up whatever olive oil they have, make this recipe and still think, oh my God, that's the most delicious thing I've ever had. And I can't believe I made that. And that to me is always the goal is accessibility, is getting people to cook. It's not to show you how much I know or what my taste is or what I think you should be doing at all times. I think it's more, do you connect with this? Do you feel empowered to cook this thing? Do you feel excited by reading these recipes? Are you actually going to do it? It's not, a vanity situation. It's, does this have actual impact in your life? And I think also 4 books in, I really did wrestle with do I really need another 20 pages at the beginning telling you about how I think you should have flaky salt? I don't know.
Yeah, it's your first book without that front matter.
Yeah, the front matter. And I told Francis, I was like, there's no front matter. It's like, I think that's fine.
I have to say, where I'm coming from, I love the fact that you use fish sauce and you're just like, there it is.
Yeah.
And you normalize this ingredient that, after 8 books, I still have to tell people what brand and how, to use.
What is your brand, by the way? I should know this.
I have a number of brands, Alison,
Okay.
but it depends on what I'm cooking.
Okay, fair.
I like Sun, S-O-N, as well as Red Boat and Mega Chef and Three Crabs, whatever that people can get. And even the Dynasty stuff at the supermarket works well.
Okay, I like all those brands.
Just none of that Thai kitchen crap. That's yucky.
Andrea After Dark.
I'm sorry, I got to put my edge out there on fish sauce. But there is this normalization and this very lived in quality. But at the same time, I loved how that typeface goes with the linens that you've chosen.
Yeah.
Some of the linens are embroidered. They have a very old fashioned quality.
Mm-hmm.
Is that reflecting where you are in your life now? Or is that just a vibe thing?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's all very lived in. I think this book is extremely cozy. It's very indoors. It's very sweater. It's very oversized mug. I'm holding an oversized mug. I know you can't see me at home, but this mug I have is so big. It's sort of crispy leaves and a nice blanket and a good album. And it's sort of meant to feel really lived in. And it is. And we shot the whole book in my place upstate, mostly in the late summer, fall, beginning of winter. We used natural light. We used vintage linens and vintage cutlery and a lot of things that I already owned in my home, a lot of things I now own from this photo shoot, which I should really get rid of because I have a lot of stuff now. I don't want to see a bowl in my book that I see in 5 other books. So it's really important to me that I find a bowl that is one of one. I found it on Etsy. I have these things that I pick up at flea markets that people are like, where'd you get that? I'm like, at a flea market in Santa Fe. You can find something like it, but you're probably not going to find that thing. And it's not to be contrarian or to sort of set this high bar of design. It's just to feel like it's so hard to feel unique these days. It's so hard to feel like you have a perspective or an opinion or taste when things sort of seem mattified and homogenous. And if it's one silly bowl that I spent maybe too much money on to have it shipped from London so I could put it in my cookbook, but that cookbook's going to last forever. So really, how much is that bowl? Is it too much? I don't know. How much is too much? But, to have a photo that feels really unique, to be like, wow, I've not seen this image. And I'm always trying to do that. And that was also the decision to use film. If we took film, we also took digital, and we would weigh the two and which one feels right, which one looks better.
So it's a mix that ended up in the final book?
Yes.
Interesting.
And of course, had so much self-consciousness about that, looking through the pages, being like, are people going to think that this is a bad photograph because it's grainy? It's film. That's why it's grainy, or it's textured, or, whatever. But ultimately, I had to put that out of my head. But yeah, I think the pursuit of creating something original drives a lot of the decisions. And from props to designer to font to color to everything. And I think when you have a book full of things like soups and beans, and there's a chicken pot pie and a tomato sauce, these are pretty basic things that I do think, have their own perspective. They're not just the same chicken pot pie or the same tomato sauce or the same whatever. I think visually it feels important to me to make sure that the whole thing feel like it has a personality and a perspective.
Yeah. A lot of what you're saying and what Britt's putting into play here visually on the page is about you being a good teacher.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really nice.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to get people to do something, that is such a rarity in modern life. is to spend time in the kitchen to make their own food that's nourishing and delicious, and it doesn't have to be difficult. What you're saying is like, just use what you got, right? Even down to the damn bowls. So, Britt, when you're designing, you're capturing that aspect of Alison's work, what are you thinking about?
I was thinking the look of this book is so different than the previous three, but underneath it all, it's still the same Alison. When you read her writing, she still has the same personal touch in all the head note of each recipe. If you really read them, I'm sure there are folks who just flip through the book and actually read the head notes, like, because she's so funny. She's such a funny writer and personable writer. Yeah. That comes through so clearly. And I guess I'd say that I'm pretending like I'm channeling Alison, but I actually find that what she's going after has risen to the surface and is so present. And it's sort of like, let me pick out the pieces that seem to be so resonant and pervasive here and use them or lift them up. Like you were saying, if there was some embroidery on the linen, or if there was a little, I don't know, if the linen had some filigree or design around it, like, oh, let's have Rosie, the illustrator, pick up on that. So it's kind of just taking the parts that are there and lifting them up. I guess to answer your question, I kind of try to get out of the way and just let those pieces that feel natural and that are already there and present, boost them up, lift them up, emphasize them even more. But I'd say that the working with the photographer Chris, that vibe is sort of, in my mind, set. He and Alison sort of, so many decisions were made with the aesthetic and vibe of the book and look of the book via the photography that I'm just there to sort of enhance them and complement them as best I can.
So were you on set for the photography as well? And it sounds like you were also working with the illustrator to prompt the illustrations and stuff.
I wasn't there. It sounds like those shoots are so quick and fast and like only necessary bodies are there to actually make them happen. The idea that I would come in art direct seems like, oh, I shouldn't get in the way of the magic that's happening. So Alison and Chris have a great working relationship and they just kind of like get it. And I'm serious. I get a Dropbox folder filled with images that are, I don't get an unfiltered view of the shoots. I'm told we have this image and this image for the dish. Which one do you prefer, Britt? Like they have it dialed in by the time I show up. So in the order of the sequence of things, Alison is writing the recipes. She cooks them, shoots them. And I get that manuscript and those photographs and I start laying things out. And in this case, there's a fourth player in our band, and that's Rosie McGinnis, the illustrator. And we found her, as we find people on social media these days. I just felt that the mood board I mentioned, her vibe, those sort of illustrations we were seeing in that, her aesthetic is so perfect in that. And also kind of like, too, that the design, while it's sort of rustic, I'm very composed and pretty, I'm keeping it on the grid. But what I liked about Rosie's drawings is just sort of, crude isn't the right word, but painterly. It's just so loose. And I loved how loose her stroke was. And that just sort of adds to the soft, warm cardigan of it all.
They're sort of primitive in a way.
Yeah. Tousled.
And was that your idea to add illustrations?
Oh, no, that was Alison's idea. Alison knew she wanted that. Again, she has these, even if she said it like, I think I want some hand-drawn elements in this. And then I found Rosie and thought, this has got to be the person. It's got to be her. And nowadays you can do a thing like see who they follow on Instagram. And I saw that she followed Alison already, and I thought, hook, line, and sinker. She's gonna love this. And she was so lovely to talk with, and
she was
just
really great.
She's from London. That's and just great. Like so easy and
very cool.
Yeah.
Cool, easy, breezy.
That tracks for these, especially the chapter openers. They're very cool
and so professional and just met deadlines. She's the best.
Was anyone from Clarkson Potter at the shoot?
No, I've never had anyone from the publisher at my shoots because it stresses me out. I think it's literally, I've always had the smallest amount of people. I think actually Stephanie Huntwork came to the first dining in shoot, the first shoot of the first book for like a day.
To be fair, you've done so much video and photography on your own, in your own career, in your own work. It's not like a first-time author saying, I'm going to run my own shoot. You have a fair amount of experience going into it.
Yeah, exactly. I think because I had that, and then a few books in, it's like, okay, we know you got it. And, the second book, it was like we had to send the photos after every shoot day, and
Sure.
they wanted to see and make sure. And by the third book, I think they were like, okay.
She's got it.
Yeah.
I've never seen Alison and Chris work together, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall as they do that. You know how like when famous artists, musicians are in the studio and then there's just someone on a couch nodding their head? I wish I was that person on the couch just watching along as they do it.
Damn. Well, this one was different. I feel like I was pretty pregnant, and I was older than I was the last time I did this. But, I have 1 to 2 assistants, and it's me. And then Chris has 1 assistant. Sometimes he's just solo. And then we have a prop stylist who doesn't have any assistants. It's a very small team.
Yeah, that's lean. Yeah.
It's very lean. I don't need more people there. I don't need more bodies. I don't need more, because to me, we joke that it always feels like summer camp. And I feel like the camp counselor, and I'm like, I don't need more campers, we're all good here. Also, it's like if they all wanted more, help, if Chris wanted to bring another assistant, if Rebecca had wanted to bring another assistant, it's like they could have. But I think it's sort of like, nah, I'm good. I think we all sort of know so clearly what the assignment is. And I do think there's something for me that I feel like better about creating something in a more intimate environment where I'm asking very specific people what they think. It's like, oh, does this look better? Like, should we switch to a spoon? Instead of 8 people weighing in, or they're feeling like this tense, uptight environment. Like, we're all just cooking and then taking pictures of the stuff. We have music playing, we have lunch together, we have dinner together sometimes. It's just, but I will say that this shoot was more difficult for me physically. And as a person who's used to doing everything themselves because they want to, I was like, oh, this is different. It was my first pregnancy. I didn't know how I would feel. And I was just like, oh, I can do anything. And I do believe that pregnant people can do anything, but it was more physically demanding in a way that I was not accustomed to, for sure.
So let's talk about the photography and some of these images that came together, because they're really interesting. Walk us through, for example, the potatoes in the cast iron skillet with the cat on the dining table.
Yeah. My cat just loves to be on the table. He is a star. And we did not make that happen. He literally just popped up on the table, and potatoes of all things. It wasn't even salmon or chicken. It was potatoes and lemon and a skillet. And we got the shot without the cat. We got the shot, not on film. And I don't know, that one was just it's so fun. Even if I had $1 million, I don't think I could pay a cat to do that. That exact pose. And to me, it just more spoke to the spirit of the book, where we're really trying to capture a moment and let it speak for itself rather than to try to, recreate a moment or make it look like someone's eating. It's like, no, you just have to eat and then it looks like someone's eating, trying to, make your hand just so you're reaching for, it's like, no, you got to actually reach for something. You have to actually move on the table. You have to dine at the table. You have to be cooking the thing for it to look real. And if you want a cat to splay out next to your skillet of potatoes, you have to have my cat, because, I don't know who else is going to do that. But animals are not to be, they can't be bought,
No. What about the chicken noodle soup in bed?
So that we did because I, again, was thinking, okay, it's chicken noodle soup. I even thought to myself, does this recipe even need to exist in this book? But because of the book and the message behind the book and the types of recipes in the book, I thought it really belongs here. And if not now, then when? I don't see myself putting a recipe for chicken noodle soup in another book. This book to me feels like a book of staples, a book of classics. And that one is that. And I think if you're reaching for, okay, I just need a great, recipe for a simple roast chicken or a split pea soup, chances are you might also feel what is, to me, the best basic version of chicken noodle soup. Okay, you can find that in here as well. So because of the simplicity of the recipe, I knew I didn't want to shoot it just like a bowl of soup on a counter. How do you make that interesting? And I thought, well, when do you eat chicken noodle soup? When you're sick. And when you're sick, you're in bed. And maybe we'll shoot it in bed. So that's how we got there.
I just thought that was a gutsy shot, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And then the other image that stood out for me was the beans and greens and your very pregnant belly.
Oh, yeah. I wanted that on the back cover of the book, but that was vetoed. That was sort of an outtake photo. It was not necessarily meant to be photographed like that. Again, we have other versions of that photo, but I don't know, I'm pregnant in this picture and I'm pregnant when I wrote this book. And I'm excited for my son, Charlie, to look at it one day and be like, oh my God, I'm in there, you know? And I think just like with Dining In and with Nothing Fancy, there's so many elements about those photos that are part of my life at that time. Oh, that's right. That's where my apartment was. That's, you know, this outfit that I don't have anymore for some reason. That's, you know, the rings I was wearing. That's the shade of nail polish I wore. And each book I make is such a scrapbook of my life. And from, you know, the types of recipes that I'm cooking and eating to the way that I'm hosting or not, to the clothes that I wear, to if I'm pregnant or not. And, you know, I didn't want to like omit that from the narrative because they are personal. You know, I'm not writing this book for someone else. I'm writing it for me.
It's a remarkable achievement, and this, I think, lived in is the quality that both the recipes and the photographs have it. And I go back to the introduction where it says, hello again. That is a very bold choice. It's a very unique choice. It's a very simple, you know, hello, comma, again.
Thank you for noticing that.
It says so much because you're like, welcome back, but here's this chapter. It didn't happen by accident that it holds together the way it does. And it's just fascinating to hear the two of you and how much thought and care and work went into creating something that you flip through it. I mean, it's a pretty basic cookbook. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. It's just a book of recipes, but yet the experience of reading it, you really feel like it's this moment of time. And as an author who struggles with something that I've heard you talk about, Alison, that your favorite way to cook, and your husband put them in the vows, is when I open up the refrigerator. Andrea, I did it last night. I was talking to you. There's nothing to make. I open it up and in 10 minutes I'm cooking, and in, you know, a short time there's my favorite kind of dinner. And if that's the kind of cook you are, to be able to translate that into recipes is, I think it's the holy grail. I think it's a really hard thing to do. And I think you've done it.
Oh, I really appreciate it. I mean, you both know how hard it is to continue to like keep other people interested, much less yourself interested in doing this time and time again. And what does reinvention mean? And for me, like the reinvention actually meant a return to something way more simple than expanding on something maybe a bit more ambitious. And yeah, I feel so grateful to be able to work with people like Britt, who also are down for that challenge and who see the complexity in something simple, and to see how actually evolved it can be to like do less and to pull back and to let things breathe and speak for themselves in a way that doesn't feel so, you know, like an assault on the senses with, you know, bells and whistles and design and flavors and textures and do. Like
colors.
It's like, yeah, it's a lot of hats on hats on hats. We're wearing a lot of, everyone's doing a lot of hats. And I'm like, what if there were fewer hats? You know, is that interesting? It is to me.
One really nice hat.
Yeah, one really nice hat. That sounds nice.
Amazing.
Was there anything unexpected or happy surprises in making the book?
Britt, did I make you fall in love with a color that you never would have otherwise used?
Are we talking about the green?
Should we? Should we go there? I can't remember the exact Pantone color. I can't believe it. I should have it tattooed on my brain.
I know. Tell me about it.
We could talk about the cover was actually kind of an interesting process, how we ended up where we ended up. Alison and I, one of these days, will design a book that just has type on the cover. One day, no picture, no nothing. We're going to go out with that kind of confidence one day.
Maybe a little illustration, but
barely anything.
Maybe,
you know,
maybe.
But one thing I learned was a very practical thing. But hey, this sort of podcast goes deep, and maybe practical answer is kind of good. But what the effect we were going for with the cover was that it sort of felt like cloth, like linen, right? Like how books used to be kind of made, right? At the quantities we're printing Alison's book, I think, you know, you'd run out of cloth halfway through the run. So we have to kind of simulate what it is like to hold a book that's made of cloth.
We were vetoed on the cloth.
You were vetoed. We tried.
It was like, unless you want a book that's like $53, we could not do cloth. And so I thought, okay, I do not want a book that is $53.
Especially not this book.
No.
Yeah. And I also think a little bit like someone's going to get tomato sauce on it. It's going to be, I want it to be wipeable and cleanable. But to that point, our original idea was that the paper texture would be uncoated. It just, if we can't have cloth, let's at least make it feel like textured, like real, you know, like toothy paper. So we picked a color, we looked at proofs. we loved it. Like, let's go, let's do it. And publisher was like, the cover is going to scuff so much. That green that's on the cover is printed. And as soon as it gets bumped in the mail, it's going to scrape and have white scars on it. Permanent scars, of course. And they sort of said something like, I bet there's going to be a lot of return on Amazon sales, you can see that now. This item is often returned. There's like fear of that. That's the worst thing. Like, I don't want to be responsible for that. So
that got vetoed.
That got vetoed. So then we ended up with a cover that's a little shinier than we wish. We wish it were a little made of natural material, so to speak, natural feeling. So it has a gloss to it, but I will say the upside to it is the green is much richer and bolder than if it were printed on an uncoated stock. So that was my takeaway. I love uncoated things. I just want to, let the naturalness come through.
Yeah, we didn't know. I was like, I'll have a cloth book and it'll be this. And I was like, oh, that's prohibitively expensive. And to your point, Molly, that is sort of the opposite point of this book, which is unassuming, humble, pretty affordable ingredients to make something remarkable. There's an incongruence there with a very expensive book. The cover was tough for that reason, where it started here and we ended up here, but ultimately grateful for the outcome. I think it's beautiful. And yeah, maybe one day it'll be cloth with a illustration and bold font, and it might be a little bit more expensive, and maybe 5 people will buy it, and that'll be my last book,
Well, who knows where your journey will take you, Alison
Exactly.
Roman.
Who could say?
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question, Alison.
Yes.
So what's your nail polish color right now?
Right now, it like weirdly matches my shirt exactly, which is very strange. The secret to my nail polish is that I pick a different color almost every time. It's very funny. Some people are like, what is the shade? But I go to the nail salon and they give you a book and they all have little nails on them with a number. So I don't know. I think this one might be Big Apple Red by OPI.
All right.
Yeah. It's more of a deep red. It's like a candy apple red. Right now it's March. It's a little dreary. Dreary is putting it nicely. It's like the worst weather you can imagine. So having something bright, it doesn't quite feel fall. I'm like, we're out of the burgundy zone, but we're not quite in melony orange zone. So we got to figure out something. And right now it's candy apple red.
Well, I think that vibes are what it's about, but I think that it's a lot more than just vibes with what you and Britt are producing. So thank you so much for talking with us today.
Of course.
Oh, you guys, I cannot thank you enough for this deep dive. It's Britt and I's greatest joy in life to talk about the process. And sometimes we think we're the only 2 people in the world who care.
Right.
We're here for it.
Your questions were so thoughtful, and we're very grateful to have the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Before we go, I want to tell you about Food Friends, Home Cooking Made Easy, a podcast for anyone who enjoys shows about cooking and baking. The hosts, Sonia and Carrie, are both former professional chefs and longtime friends, and their show delivers both inspiration and practical kitchen tips. And what I really love is that they love to talk about their favorite cookbooks, new and old, and the recipes that they've tried. New episodes come out twice a week, and I like to listen when I'm on my way to the market or looking for fresh kitchen inspiration. Find Food Friends wherever you get your audio. Get more recipes and info at foodfriendspodcast.substack.com.
Thank you all for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. There are other ways to support the show too. Go to everythingcookbooks.com and check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch. You can also buy us a round of coffee. Better yet, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you so much to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.